Shravya,
Hi.
welcome to Brand Game Strong.
Thank you.
This is weird.
Yeah.
It's weird because we were just talking before we recorded that,
Yeah.
well, we've actually become friends and it's like, don't know how formal to be versus how unhinged.
Yeah. We'll be chilled. We'll be calm. Yeah.
Yes. So, can we just start off with maybe an introduction? So tell us who you are and what you do.
I'm Sravya. Wait, let me start again. I was like, wait, what's my name? Okay. I was like, wait, who am I? I'm Sravya. I'm an artist, illustrator, graphic designer, creative director, and I'm from Hong Kong. My art focuses on social impact, and I have a design studio called Hello Color, and that's all about doing creative campaigns focused on social impact, I guess. And I'm also finishing up my master's in neuroscience and psychology of mental health. So I'm very much in the mental health advocacy space as well.
Why art and why mental health specifically?
That's a very good question. So I'm third cultured. I grew up in Hong Kong. I also grew up in Korea. And one of the early things that I struggled with in my cultural identity was language, because my parents speak Telugu and English at home. When I was in Korea, you naturally pick up Korean. And then in school, there's English and French. And then I moved to Hong Kong, where that was Cantonese, Mandarin, and I also took Spanish, and I dropped Korean and French. So with all of this, like, language became really important in a way to connect with people. And I struggled with all of these languages, you know? But the one thing that I found that I could communicate with people was art. It became a universal language for me, and a way I could like communicate more than I could in any of these languages. So that kind of became my language and my form of expression before I knew. So that's why art. And I fell into it career-wise as well. And mental health, similarly, moving around a lot. My identity, and I struggle with anxiety from a young age. And I think art helped me express that when I didn't know how to verbally explain what I was going through. And they kind of just went hand in hand. And that's what I wanted to communicate to other people, what I was going through using art. And yeah, explain to people what it feels like, ask for help. And as I grew up, it kind of helped me connect with other people. So yeah.
You know, I feel like it's worth talking about how I came across your work, because it's very weird, but I, during lockdown is probably when I found your illustration work. And what I found was most striking about it was that you were talking about mental health in a very nuanced and very specific way. I felt like it was also a time where, you know, people were throwing around a lot of mental health terminology without really understanding what it is and, you know, what the differences are and all the different types of mental health or like mental illnesses you can have as well. And myself included, I felt like, you know, I was learning and I didn't know enough about it, and I probably still don't. But what I remember from your work the most was your focus on normalizing mental health in men. And I think on the BGS Instagram page, I shared a lot of your work, like consistently over months. And every time you came up with something new, I was just like, wow, like this is really, really good. Both like technically in terms of the design, but also in terms of like the messaging and the way that you kind of married the two up. So I feel like anyone who follows BGS from those days would definitely remember your work. So yeah, it's super exciting because I feel like at the time also you were living in Hong Kong, right?
Yeah.
And how weird that you're now in London and we're here.
I know. I could never predict that. But
yeah. So before we go into, I guess, like your roots and upbringing, what brought you to London?
Ooh, a lot of things. So in Hong Kong, I went to British school, and most of my friends moved to the UK after. But most of my family being Telugu, the migration is usually to the US, and the American dream is a really big thing. And my parents were the only ones who didn't move to the US, and they moved to Hong Kong, and that was like them rebelling. And so I expected to, when I moved to the US, to be there forever kind of thing. But it was a culture shock, and my friends were all here. And in terms of art, training, and all of that, US was also the place to be, but a lot of the art history and the creative community that I saw in the UK, that's what I wanted to explore. So yeah, eventually I wanted to do my master's in actually fine art here, and the goal was to move here eventually, but during COVID and how it all came about was very unplanned. I came to drop my sister in university during COVID because I didn't want my parents taking that risk, so I was like, I'll be the one. And so I came to drop her, and I was exploring options. So at this point, I had already started my own business, and I was planning for the global talent visa because I have an Indian passport. So moving to another country is not easy. And that's what I was exploring. And I thought it would take different, it would take like way longer. So I was kind of preparing my application and just doing the research, but I couldn't go back because of COVID and the airports had shut in Hong Kong. And travel was really difficult. And my partner decided to come visit me because he was like, I don't know when I'll see you. Like, I'll come for Christmas kind of thing. And my parents as well. And we all got stuck. And so we were like, okay, let's just keep extending until the airports open. And we had unplanned moved in together, which is so
like a lot of people did.
inappropriate. Right? Yeah. And I also ended up getting a different visa, which is an innovator visa, which was kind of like Shark Tank. You pitch to the home office and you pitch to an accelerator. So an accelerator has to back your company. And that the lawyers and like, my dad and my uncle who were like trying to help me with this, they were all like, it's a 3% acceptance type of thing. It's very tough and it's going to take years. So I was prepared, it was something that, but it came within a month during COVID, which was unheard of. And it was all completely unplanned. And I didn't know it was going to happen that quickly. And again, we were like hotel hopping. And I was like, this is not sustainable or affordable, especially now that I have to start a business in the UK. And then so we just signed a lease because we didn't know when we would be able to go back. So it was all completely unplanned. But I think now we're 2 years in, we're kind of settling, figuring out what just happened and going with it. Yeah.
How did that feel mentally for you, given that you're a freelancer, you work for yourself predominantly?
Yeah.
Financially, how was that? And just generally, like, the turbulence of moving, isn't that one of the most stressful things you can do?
Yeah. And I think in terms of moving, I've moved so many times in my life. I think there's two ways to look at it. One is really scary. And as a kid, to like be uplifted multiple times, it really messes with you. But the other side is like, there's so much benefit in like moving countries. You learn how to assimilate. You become a lot more confident, and your identity and your home is attached to the people. You know your values really clearly. You don't get attached to like physical homes or like objects. It's very much who and what is home for you. What are your beliefs? All of those things. So yeah, I always look at moving like a challenge. And even now, I think my partner being Sindhi and their culture, they've moved a lot too. And I think both of us look at home as like family, and we're always going to like challenge ourselves and not get too comfortable in a place, so we're always on the move. And in that way, I was excited, but I've never done it this unplanned and unprepared. And that took a toll because I didn't have the support system. I didn't build all of that during COVID. And back in Hong Kong, at this point, before I moved, I had signed an office lease, and I had a team of 8 full-time employees. And it was just growing and scaling in Hong Kong. And then I thought the innovator visa and that like scaling in London would be a slow, but like I would get all the funding and figure things out before actually moving. So it was a lot of decisions that I had to make. And eventually I decided, like, first, I have to take care of my mental health, and I want to be able to support other creatives and other artists. That's why I like expanded my company. But to be able to do that, I need to be in the best place and figure out the landscape here. So I decided, now I'm just like, I have one employee, but I'm now again in a place where I'm like, planning on scaling and growing. And hopefully I'll get to that place again where I can support more creatives.
Love that.
So yeah, it's
Very
a
noble.
balance. Yeah.
Speaking of kind of moving a lot as a child, I think we can move into your childhood and upbringing. I wanted to ask firstly, like, who actually were you as a kid, and what interested you, and what did you spend your free time doing?
Oh, no one's ever asked me that. I was actually very rebellious as a kid. I think it was just all the moving and the disruption, and yeah, I was very angsty, and I had art as an outlet. So, I was very much the art. Like, I used art. I would actually, more than like painting and stuff that I did privately, like at home, I would always carry a camera. And I have actually, like, I started a camera collection when I was really young, and I now have about 20 cameras. So that is like a very personal, like, hobby that I have. And so I would be very rebellious. I would like party a lot, put my parents through a lot. And I also spent most of my time doing field hockey. So I was very like the sporty kid, and that's where all my friends were. But even at like trainings, I would always have a camera, and I would like record and film my friends and make videos. And that was always my form of expression. And like when I had that angsty phase and I was going through, struggles with my mental health, I would make a lot of like dark art, and I would film like movies about, they're still on YouTube, which is really embarrassing, but about like teenage like suicidal thoughts, or sexual assault and things, because that's just what I was interested in, and the art around that, like the Tumblr, like edgy angsty era, that was very much me. So it's interesting because I was very rebellious, but I had that like creative outlet, but I definitely put my parents through a lot. Yeah.
Did you ever have that phase where you had like that side fringe?
Oh,
yeah, I had that.
I dyed my hair like, was it dip dye trend? And I had like blonde and I had pink.
Wow.
Yeah, and then my like 8-year-old sister, she like followed me, and she had like blonde and then blue. My parents allowed me to express myself and do all the weird things, the eyeliner and all of that. And I'm grateful that they let me go through my weird phases.
Yeah. I also had a side fringe when I was about like, I don't know, like 13, 14. And because I have Indian thick hair and it's naturally a bit greasy, it just did not do well for my forehead and it just didn't sit right. And I was just like, no.
What's a really funny thing in Hong Kong, they are used to dealing with Chinese hair, right?
Yeah.
Which is really different texture. So they would try to do those like haircuts, but it would just not work out for me, and it would just be poofy, and like the hairstylist would be upset with me. And then
like, how dare you have like hair that I can't handle?
It was, so none of the haircuts turned out great for me.
That's so cool that you had a camera collection. Like, what types of cameras were they, and do you still have them?
Yeah, I have so many. I don't know what I'm gonna do with any of them, but so I started with the small like digital cameras, and then I got my first DSLR because my uncle was also really into photography, just like family photos and stuff. But he introduced me when I was, I think, 14 to DSLRs. So then I had my big DSLR camera that I would take everywhere. I had like a Flickr account. That was like the big thing, and then I got into video cameras, and I was very lucky that in my school we had like IB film, and in that I learned a lot about like film criticism and like history of film and all of that. And so I went back and I took my dad's like camcorder, like the Sony camcorder, and I started getting into like that kind of artsy film as well. And then I got into film photography, and then as part of my fine art degree you have to take photography classes as well. So there I got to learn how to develop my own photos, like film cameras. So then I started collecting film cameras. And then it just got into this like collecting film. And then even when I was working in the agency world, my creative director gifted me his old SLR, which is like the film DSLR. Yeah. And I still have that. I just developed film. So it's a very like, I'm glad I still have that, and I don't necessarily share that, but it's like something that connects me to my childhood passion. And yeah, it's just a growing collection. I don't know what I'll do with it, but yeah.
I just invested in my first film camera as well.
Ooh.
Well, I wanted a DSLR as well when I was a teenager. I feel like it was all the rage.
Yeah.
And then I somehow missed the boat. I could have like maybe, you know, waited for one of my birthdays or something to get it when I was a kid. But I also got told that, well, like you're going to use it for like a week and then you're going to just not use it. And I was like, yeah, to be fair, my personality was like that.
Yeah, I mean, I went through a lot of things as well, but I think the camera stayed. You know, I had, I used to also figure skate. So I did like professional figure skating, and I thought I was going to be, yeah, I had like a lot of random hobbies, and my parents like fully like allowed me to believe, they were also delusional about me, and they allowed me to believe that I was going to be the next like Indian Michelle Kwan, because I like lived in Korea, right? And Michelle Kwan, I would watch her ice skate, and I was like, I'm gonna be the brown Michelle Kwan. But like I had to stop ice skating and like focus on studies. And I was like crushed. And I like vowed to never get back on the ice.
That is such a like brown Michelle Kwan thing to say though. Like I had to study and give it up. Not to stereotype us, but
yeah. Yeah.
Funny.
But yeah, I still had all of, you know, these creative passions.
So speaking of being the next brown figure skater, what was your relationship like with your cultural heritage? Because I think you mentioned you grew up speaking Telugu at home. So you are Telugu by cultural heritage, right? And now you're a little bit Sindhi as well. But can we talk about what it was like growing up in, I guess, in the East, and particularly in Hong Kong, as like someone who's Telugu?
Yeah, I mean, I was just, you know, I've been thinking about it a lot now that I'm going to enter my 30s, and like, just where am I, who am I, all these like big questions.
Yeah.
And I think I never really thought about my identity as much being in the East, because you're very much still connected to India and like Asia, and Hong Kong was very unique. So yeah, I'm Telugu. In Hong Kong, there wasn't much of a Telugu community, because I think Telugu people often migrate to the US for their career, which is, most people are engineers or doctors, and the American dream was a big thing for Telugu people. So most of my family is also in the US. So in Hong Kong, you get a lot more Sindhi, Gujarati, a lot more North Indians. And so being Telugu, the only way I could connect to it, because there wasn't other Telugu people that were there, like I'm second generation, right? They usually would come for maybe an IT job and then go. So it was always a place in transit for Telugu people, but not necessarily like people who have settled there. Very few people that are Telugu have settled in Hong Kong. So to me, I didn't have Telugu friends. And what I knew about being Telugu was through going to Hyderabad, because I still had my grandparents there, and speaking Telugu at home and watching Tollywood. So that's, you know, and the food. You know, I always ate, like every morning was like dosa. It had to be dosa. So that's what I loved. And but I learned to kind of put it in a box, you know. I loved it, but it kind of felt like no one really talked about it, because even now in I guess media, you now see South Indian and like different types of Indian, but it is very much I think Telugu is still like a smaller community. You get a lot of like Tamil representation, and I just ended up, you know, relating to that, because that's the closest representation I saw. But in Hong Kong, I grew up with a lot of Sindhi and Gujarati friends, and to me that was kind of enough. And like through them, I could like identify with like having brown parents, and also because Hong Kong is so international, I never felt too out of place, you know, and the nuances are different because you're in an Asian country. You're all Asian. It's not really like minorities versus like white people, even though that's there. It's a little bit more complicated. And then being Indian, you're like a minority in an Asian country. That's also, all of these things are very subtle and different. And in Asia, we don't really address the things as blatantly as they do in the US. So when I went to the US, I started to think like, where am I going to fit in? And I also expected to fit in right away in the US because I thought, well, I don't fit in with my Indian cousins in India. I'm definitely not having the same experience growing up. I don't get the pop culture references that they're making in India. And I thought my experience will be very similar to American Indians. And then when I went to the US, I started to, you know, ask these questions of myself. Where do I fit in? I was so excited to like meet other Telugu people because there's more of a community there. And yeah, that was like a whole journey. And then I think now moving back to Hong Kong, moving to the UK, which has like helped me find community and answer these questions, I'm very much still figuring out what my identity is.
How do you, if at all, infuse that identity into what you do professionally?
So I studied fine art, and part of my fine art is like learning art history, art criticism, a lot of like feminism classes, a lot of different like interdisciplinary art. And towards the end of the 4 years, after also going through my personal cultural identity journey, I realized a lot of what I had learned was Western art, you know? And I actually trained as a painter in India. When I would go for summers, I trained like traditionally in like oil painting. But there you only, like the schools that I went to for oil painting, you learn how to paint like Indian gods. So I was like, wait, none of this has been covered in art history. And, you know, so for me as an artist, I wanted to explore that and bring that into my art. And I worked in, you know, I had very corporate clients and corporate gigs, and this was before I was like a social media artist. And so my way of bringing that in, my like little part in history was through skin tone, because I wanted to see brown illustrations. And my youngest memory of art, and I think when you look at like children's education, children's illustration books are like the first concepts of art for me. And in that, I never saw brown skin tones. So that's where I started. Whenever I did an illustration or design, I would make sure I put in representation. Whatever I could do in like marketing campaigns, make sure that a South Asian person was represented. And that's how it started to grow.
Yeah. Actually, that's very starkly obvious in your work, because what I like about it, and I think I've spoken to some previous guests about this topic as well, of like this idea of like infusing our cultures into our work without shouting about them. Because I think we're at a stage now in, let's say, media and pop culture where there is obviously a lot of like, you know, we're here, we're brown, and we're proud of it. And I think that's amazing. There's also this whole other side of how do we explore nuances in culture and like lots of different ranges of experiences.
Yeah.
And what I like about your work is that you're very conscious about introducing the diversity angle. And like, it's one of those things where I feel like I look at it and I resonate with it, because I feel like the characters are like kind of like characters that I could be possibly, or that people in my community could identify with. Yet you're talking about topics like mental health and even like more specific than that, things like depression or ADHD, and which I think is probably the future and like what we're going to keep doing more of. I talk about this as well, about how like this platform that I run is obviously about like bringing on South Asians from all walks of life, yet how much of that is us shouting about us being South Asian versus just talking about the work we do and who we are as people, which is so much more broad than that.
Exactly.
There's a balance to be struck, right? And I think your work does strike that And and I feel like that's also why it resonates with a lot of different communities, because ultimately it's also not about gatekeeping, right, what we know and what our stories are, but actually like sharing. And I don't know, I find it a very interesting topic, and it's something that I think a lot of us are thinking about now, because it's like we've been in this space for such a long time, talking about the very outwardly stereotypical things about being desi, which also is kind of like an overgeneralization, right?
Yeah. I mean, so I think I think maybe like 2013, from there onwards, like with Mindy Kaling and stuff, I started to see representation first. And then I felt like I couldn't belong, like fit into that, because I'm Telugu. I didn't like watch Bollywood movies growing up because I speak Telugu. I understand Hindi, but I couldn't relate, you know? I don't know how to dance. So, you know, there was like ways that I felt kind of not represented. And I then felt like maybe it wasn't brown enough. Right. And after learning more about the diaspora and like realizing, you know, there's South Asians in Fiji and like Caribbean and, you know, Spain's in these, like all these subcultures, I then realized like, okay, like Hong Kong Indians are a thing, you know, and that itself is like a subculture. And like, instead of trying to fit into, you know, all these other types, like there is like me as who I am, and I can kind of put that forward. And even in terms of the illustration, like the kind of brown people that I put forward or like I illustrate are, you know, they have tattoos because there's brown people with tattoos. And I don't necessarily feel comfortable in Indian clothes because I didn't have opportunities to wear them, right? And that's kind of what I wanted to, just me as I am, because I think there are other people like me and they want to, you know, see representation. And if I get an opportunity to do projects that are more about being Telugu, I would love to, because I would love to explore that as well, you know. And I think arts allowed me to kind of figure out my cultural identity, but also in the, you know, art space, and put that forward to other artists and like the clients that I work with. Because another thing that comes up in like illustration and like art discussions is representation. So that's something with a lot of my clients that, you know, I talk about, is just like media in the arts. A lot of the times illustrators that are chosen for projects, they represent maybe people that they, or communities that they don't belong to. And at what point does that become a stereotype, right? Because I can draw brown women because I know how I would like to highlight them. But at the same time, I say like, I'm not comfortable, you know, maybe talking about other people's experiences, right? And I think there's someone better suited. And in the same way, like media, right? Like you should be commissioning artists that belong to that community to make a real representation of that rather than a portraiture or a caricature. So that's something that, you know, I'm very much like, I will reference another artist and be like, I think for this project, this person will do a better job, or I'll only do it if I'm commissioned by somebody who's comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
Right. And like, I still have to do work. So I'm like, you know, do you realize that you're asking me to represent a community that, you know, are you comfortable with that? So I draw a lot of like diverse men. I'm not a man, but as long as I'm being commissioned, I'll never do it like in a way that, you know, is a caricature or, you know, get their permission. And if you see in all my art, the women are either photos of me or like my family members or my friends, and the men are all my dad or my husband Krish. So, yeah,
Really?
that's why they all have a beard. My husband has a beard. Yeah,
That's amazing.
So because I don't
realize.
feel like it's right to represent somebody that you don't have the permission to, right? And I can speak on men's mental health because I have those conversations with my husband and my father, or my cousin, and those are the people that I choose to draw.
It's interesting how intentional it is, actually, because I would not have thought about that looking at your art, but it's really cool to see that there's so much of a process, like mentally, that you go through before you decide to work on a piece. And actually, that's probably a really nice segue into talking about art in general and like your career, because you are a freelancer and you've moved around a lot, and we all know like the world of freelance is just a minefield.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me about how you actually like stepped into this career out of university, and I guess and just what it's been like over the years. Like if you walk us through a bit your experience
Yeah.
professionally.
I think even so, I always was creative, but I never thought that I would pursue fine art
Yeah.
because that is still scary. And my parents, although they're huge supporters of me, delusionally supportive, they also didn't have other people that they could ask questions. Like, my daughter wants to go into this. Could you guide us?
Yeah.
Right. So for them, they were like, that's great that you want to do art, but could you do a double major with communication? Because that's like something else, like, we're a little bit scared kind of thing. I went to summer school at USC, and I was going to explore communications, but the course was called visual communication, which isn't mass communications, it's design. And so I accidentally ended up in the art school. And I
Oh.
was like, wow, this is amazing. So I then applied for the course, and I promised my parents I would do a double major. But once I got there, I didn't even know it was fine art, right? Which includes art history, art criticism, and my program was like, you have to do foundation level like sculpture, photography, drawing, and design theory, right? And so all of this, like, I fell into the world of art without knowing what I was getting myself into. I still did do a minor in communications, which was really helpful. And even within that, I think just me being Asian, I felt that there weren't enough resources, or the path to becoming a painter was clear, or that there was space for me. This was before social media was like this big, and South Asian art was just coming up. Like, I think that was just when hate copy was becoming big.
Yeah.
Namisha Banot, I think.
Yes.
Toronto scene, right? Because I was in LA. The Toronto scene was like just coming up, but I didn't think I could make it. And so I did a double emphasis in painting and graphic design, but I chose to go down corporate graphic design. So working in agencies, and the path was you work as a junior designer and you slowly work your way up to creative director, and that's kind of the big title. You've made it in a big agency, and having a portfolio was kind of your awards. Let's say. I mean, there's also awards, but like, you needed that portfolio. And so I knew that I would go back to Asia, so I worked on top of studying full time, and it's not easy on Indian passport, because I don't know how this is allowed, but back then unpaid internships was like allowed, right? And so I was like, I will drive and I will barter, because they are not willing to pay me, and they'll take somebody who's a citizen just because of the visa things. So I was like, I need to get my foot through the door. So every semester, like between classes, I would drive like to Santa Monica or wherever, and I would be like, look, like, anyways, I need to do yoga. I like love doing yoga. So I was like, I will be a receptionist, and I will can I apprentice under your designer, and just give me free yoga classes, so that way I can save on yoga and I'll get my foot through the door. And then I would, they were like, sure. So I would use that experience, put that in my portfolio, and then go apply for the next job. And so my 4 years there, I did 8 internships, and I worked my way up in terms of those internships as well. I started like small gigs, whoever would take me, to then like using that portfolio to I got some amazing experiences. I worked for the Do Lab, which is like an experiential agency, and they have a stage at Coachella, like the coolest stage at Coachella. And so I got to design for Coachella, go backstage. Like, it was, these amazing experiences. And then I interned in New York for Ariana Huffington's health company.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so it's called Thrive Global. And so I kind of slowly, I was into yoga, I was into wellness. So I started going down that route. And I think all these like internships and job experiences, for me, it wasn't necessarily figuring out what I wanted to do, but I was making a big list of what I didn't want to do.
Right.
So I was like, oh, I'm not working for people who don't value me, people who are racist. I didn't really love like corporate. So career-wise, it was also a good move to go back to Hong Kong because they valued American training. And in the US, the market was very saturated at that moment. It was very difficult to get a job, especially to get a visa, right? And I was like, that's a lot on my mental health. So I went back to Hong Kong, and I knew that it was just right time, right place. I knew that there was demand. I had, built up a network of like people. I would, again, same thing. I would just be like, please take me. Like my first job, they so underpaid me. Okay. Like it was ridiculous, but I took it anyways. Also because I didn't have the self-confidence to like, even though I had such a big portfolio already, I was just like, I don't know anyone here. So like, I'll take whatever. I didn't even apply to like more companies. I just took the first job because I was like, I just need to get my foot through the door. Because my dad was like, don't come back unless you have a job. Right. So I was like, here's a job.
How much did they pay you, if you don't mind?
£1,000 a month, which is very little. Okay. And this is still back in the day. And I was very like, that's also the reason I moved back home to be with my parents, because I was like, I'm not going to fund myself. And in Asia, as a creative, nobody values you, kind of thing. It's changed now. But back then, it was just not a thing. So then again, I worked in PR agencies as a designer, junior designer, and I hustled. Like that's the one thing I like. If I'm passionate and I have that goal of like, I heard that you have to become creative director. That's like what you need to be. So I hustled. I did. And I think that's also the Hong Kong like Chinese work life thing. Like you don't leave work. You compete to be the last person to leave. So I would leave at like 2 a.m. Like you, even if you're just pretending to work, like you don't just like chill. That's not the culture there. So I worked my ass off, and then I moved into a WPP agency. So that was like a dream for anyone, right? And there I got to work with a really awesome creative director. He really supported me, and we got to kind of grow together, and I got to work with all of the dream clients. This is very like, I wasn't on social media or anything, right? It was just building my career in the corporate world. And I got the opportunity to work my way up to like senior designer. And then it was COVID and they stopped hiring. So my creative director kind of was unhappy. So he kind of mentally checked out, stopped coming to work. And I took that as an opportunity to just lead the team. So I recruited and I did everything that I wanted to do. And then I was like, okay, so now I know how it feels like to be a creative director, or like I can see my future, but there's got to be more, and at the same time, all of this was graphic design, and on the side I really saw value in illustration, but I didn't have training in illustration. So I would just post my own artwork on social media, and I started to get paid gigs. I turned them down because I had an NDA. The NDA? Or non-compete, sorry. I had a non-compete, so, and I was already in my dream job, so I wasn't trying to do illustration gigs. But then with COVID, I was really frustrated. I didn't feel valued. Being South Asian in Hong Kong, I didn't feel valued as a creative because although I was doing all the big client work, you're not getting paid as like your finance friends, right? Even though you're doing big gigs. So all of this frustration, I saved up half of my I saved up all my like money, and I used half. Well, I didn't use half. I decided if I didn't get any work, it was during COVID, I would survive a year and I would still have half my savings left. So I quit. And I only quit when I started to get gigs that I couldn't turn down. They like one gig would have paid like my entire salary. So at that point I was like, okay, I can take this risk. It was a very calculated risk. And the point was never to move to London, was to like still, I was thinking about moving out and like living with my partner, but all of that was on hold if I was going to do this, and it just took off from there. And yeah, a lot of what I post on social media isn't the graphic design work and that portfolio that I have. So it's important that I have that, because I had the confidence that I could go back to my job, and that portfolio no one can take away from me. So I hope that I can still get a job one day if I really need to. I think that's really important to mention, because it was a very calculated risk. Because sometimes I think you can see the glamorous parts and think that I'm going to take this risk, but you don't see like, you know, I had the privilege of like, I saved up and I had ways to like save. Hong Kong's a very small city. It's affordable. I was getting paid in like US dollars and pounds, and you're spending in Hong Kong dollars. You save money. Like these are really important like things, right? And when I moved to London, it's not the same. I'm not saving as much. I moved out. Like rent is really expensive here. Things are different. And like now I'm having to navigate that. But yeah, it's a good challenge. You know, I think if I stayed in Hong Kong, it would be me getting comfortable. And I don't think I can grow as much. I think I was at the right time, right place, calculated risk in Hong Kong. And now I want to grow. There wasn't that like support and that creative community in Hong Kong that could mentor me, because I'm still quite young and I have like a long career journey ahead of me, and I think UK has that like creative space where I can like learn and grow. So I needed to like push myself and get out. Yeah, that was a long-winded answer, but yeah.
It was fascinating. Is creative director still the dream for you?
Yeah, I luckily have been able to. I've been creative director for different companies now. And mental health startup, I was creative director for over a year. Our Streets now, I was a creative director for 2 years. Yeah, I have a lot of clients that I do, you know, the big gigs for, the creative direction for their brands. So it's pretty amazing that I still get to do that. And sometimes in the traditional advertising world, I've had other creative directors tell me that like, I'm asking for this title too early. How can they give me this title when there's another senior designer that has, you know, is 8 years older to me? And I was like, but my portfolio speaks for itself. Not to be cocky, but like, I have the technical skill. Why is age, you know, a barrier? Or like, maybe, you know, I don't know. But sometimes these like traditional, I think traditional pathways don't work. And if my clients are willing to believe in me and my portfolio speaks for itself, I can be trusted and I've proven myself again and again. Why not, right?
It sounds to me like you're, you know, extremely sure of what you bring to the table. And I think it's so amazing to see that. But when people kind of project their own ageism on you in the workplace, and, you know, especially when you're new, working for a new brand or something, and you have a new team around you, does that ever actually get to you? Do you ever like question yourself and think, am I actually too young? Like, do I actually know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, 100%. I think, you know, because we're friends and you know me personally, like I'm a very anxious individual, right? But when it comes to work, I do rely on looking back at what I've done. And I think the creative career, in a way, is so good for that because I have a portfolio that I can rely on. No one can take that away from me. I've worked on these clients. I've like proven myself I can do this. And on a day-to-day basis, I totally question myself. And I think also with my mental health, I'm like a very anxious. You know, I always have a lot of self-doubt, right? And the other thing is art is so subjective. And you're always looking for other people in the community to value it. So it can be really difficult to like believe in yourself. And it helps to have really delusional parents and a husband that believe in you so much more than yourself, and friends that are supportive. But not everyone is, and it definitely gets to me, right? But yeah, it's even small things like I have Post-it notes, and my partner makes me do this. Even the smallest like achievements, like a new client reached out to me, and I will put it on a Post-it and put it on the wall, and I need to look at those things.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, actually, because very similarly to you, I think when I'm talking about stuff that I've done to friends, I become quite meek sometimes. And I'm like, it's only recently that I've actually started to like even have a more confident posture when I'm talking about like my achievements or whatever. Like even the fact that I just did that, like I've just called myself out. But like the point being, when I'm sitting here, like doing this, I feel very at ease and very comfortable. But then I think when I'm talking about it, there's so much more, like there's like, you know, is it good enough? Should I be talking about it? Should I be this confident? Do I not need at least 10 more years of experience, a few more gray hairs before I can like confidently say that I've achieved something? And actually, to your point of your sticky notes, I think that's a great idea. I myself have started doing that because I've realized that just like anybody else, and I'm sure you have this as well, have really, really down days and then really, really like high highs and like very low lows. And, you know, people don't mostly see that because I'm not going to be sitting here like talking about everything in real time. But everything feels most of the time like a failure.
Yeah.
And I think that's just the nature of like being in this and trying something new. And only recently have I started taking screenshots of like anytime someone will send me a message or some really cool person starts following BGS on Instagram. And I'm just like, wow, what is life?
Yeah.
Like, I've started actually saving it all in a folder on my phone, and I've called it wins. And it sounds cocky, but it really works.
You need to be your biggest cheerleader.
You need to have evidence.
Yeah.
I think my therapist tells me this. She says, collect evidence so that you can't second guess yourself and talk yourself into thinking that you've not done anything worthwhile. Right?
Yeah. I mean, same thing in therapy. Like I really struggle with like self-doubt, like even though I've had like all these achievements. And I think that was the other thing, like being Asian, like I needed these achievements to feel that I could prove myself. Like, although my parents support me so much, there wasn't support like from like the wider community, even from my parents. Like I think people were like, oh, you know, I'm so sorry that, you know, Shravya's gone into art. Or like they just assume it's because I'm not good at math, or like I think it's also because I'm Telugu and I think a lot of people in my family, they don't even, it's not about how much money you make or like even business. You have to be a doctor or an engineer. And even within that, it's like, as you know, they, you know, how impressive is like your specialization? Like, you know, well, one of my cousins is like an oncologist or like a pediatric neurosurgeon. Like those are the accolades, not necessarily whether they're making money or not, right? Or you know, did they go to Ivy League or like what university? And all of these things, I feel that even though my parents are like, don't bother about it, and they've worked through a lot of that so that I wouldn't have to, I still carry that guilt, right? And with that, you know, I have a lot of self-doubt, and I feel like I lean on like, oh, I need this award, or, you know, I got into the Tatler list, and that was like, that was like, okay, so like hopefully people will think that, you know, I'm successful now and stop questioning me. And even though like my biggest supporters believe in me, right? And that is so, I don't know if it's like generational trauma, but like it feels like that, right? And so my therapist suggested a cheers list. So this is something Krish and I do quite often, where we sit down once a month and we write down like our achievements, no matter how small or big, right? We just write them down and we cheers to each one. We'll say them out loud, cheers to them, and it like really promotes that like celebrating all the small things and like remembering to celebrate. You know,
I mean, Tatler, can we just talk about that for a sec? Because you had not just got on the list, but you had a whole spread of your face on Tatler Asia magazine, right?
Yeah.
I saw that on your social media, and I was going to ask you actually, like, how did that actually come about? Like, did you put yourself forward for it?
No, yeah. So I asked my now friend, like, so I made a lot of friends through the Tatler like Gentee list, like other other young people. And I was like, so how did you, you know, how did you get? And she was like, I still to this day have no idea. It was like one of these like, because like growing up in Hong Kong, like Tatler's like everywhere. Like I don't know if it's big around the world or like in the US, but in Hong Kong it's like a really big thing, right? So it's always on the table, coffee tables, like wherever you go. And so I never imagined that like I would show up in one of those, and I didn't even think about applying. But I just randomly got an email. I was in Ibiza on vacation, and I was like, is this like a scam, you know, at first? And they were like, oh, when can you come for a photo shoot? And I was like, so we need to end our trip early because I'm going to go to Hong Kong for this photo shoot. Like I need to go back home. And they were like, this day. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll be there. But it was just, I still to this day, I don't know who's nominated me. But I know that the board has to like nominate you, and but it's been amazing because it brings credibility. It put me in touch with a lot of other founders and amazing advocates and young people doing great things. So for me, it's really big to go back to Hong Kong and support other artists and minorities and advocate for mental health, back home. So now that I have this community and this credibility, some of the projects that I was doing solo, I now have this community that can like bring them to life. So it's an amazing opportunity, and yeah, it feels surreal, you know. Yeah.
It's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Speaking of community, I think before we started recording, we were talking about things like, you know, is art school actually necessary to become an artist or to be credible? So I'd love to get your thoughts on that, having been through the degree yourself, I guess. And then actually, I also want to ask you, how do you then plan to use your company, Hello Color, to promote other artists and support them in the right way and help them with things like how to get funding, etc., which are like all $1,000,000 questions, I guess.
Yeah. So the art school one is such a controversial question because most people will say you don't need to go to art school, right? It's very expensive. It's not accessible. And that's like a whole topic because I feel like art education should be in like public education systems. I feel like everyone needs access to art because it is as important as, you know, STEM. I think now it's called STEAM. So there is like arts within that category, but it's equally as important anyways. I think if your goal is to make money through art, no, 100% you don't need to, because you can learn that skill. Everyone has that skill to be creative. It's like riding a bike. You can go on YouTube, learn how to be an illustrator. The skill is, you know, the internet has made it really accessible to train yourself, and you can make money off of it because you can market yourself through social media and do it. So 100% no. But at the same time, I am a very big fan of the academic side because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I can't speak for all the different art programs out there. But for mine, I really enjoyed it because I knew I was creative, but I didn't know what I could do. And I didn't have the resources to even know, oh, what is a creative director or like a painter, or like I only knew of like these few roles, right? But there's such a big world out there. Like you could become an art critic, you could be a curator, like what are all of these things? And so my degree at USC was very interdisciplinary, where they make you take art criticism, which is about like writing about art and like critiquing art, art history, sculpture, photography, and design, drawing. And with that, you learn how to become creative, and you learn about the different fields that are there that I think will allow you to stay in the creative industry beyond a single skill, right?
Yeah.
That's the one thing. And the second thing is to understand art history and have that knowledge of like the art world will allow you to place your art in history and in the current space and know where you're taking references from, what power your art has, and how to articulate like what your art is about. I think those are really good skills to have. And yeah, that kind of like literature is, I really enjoyed it. And I guess that kind of shows people how serious you are, right? And also the biggest thing is a network. I think it's really lonely to be an artist, and so to study with other creatives, and now, you know, some of my closest friends are in different fields of art, so I can now, you know, ask them what it is like to be a curator or a UX designer, and I think that brings you that community. And of course, I think traditional jobs, like some of the graphic design jobs in the art world, they will obviously, you will stand out on applications having that technical training, right?
Yeah.
So I'm a big like believer in studying it. I just hope that it's more accessible.
Could
to
you, I was
people.
going to say, could you teach yourself how to do it if you say you didn't have the financial means to go to art school?
Yeah, I think you definitely can. And it does come from, you know, I went to art school in the first 2 years. I didn't really understand the value of it. But a lot of it comes from self-studying as well, right? Like what you're interested in. And it can only take you to a certain level. But I continue to go to art galleries, like put myself in, you know, these spaces and train and talk to people and constantly learn. And I think, yeah, as long as you have an interest, you can just dive into it. I think the more you're in the art world, the less it'll seem like a mystery. Yeah.
And the second question, which was around how do you plan to use Hello Color to support other artists and up-and-coming artists specifically?
Yeah, so I think a big thing for me with Hello Color, so it's a studio, right? A design studio where I work with all kinds of organizations, companies, on creative campaigns focused around social impact. So anything from like mental health to like ESG, environmental social governance. Um, yeah, anything social impact related. We specialize in using art and design for creative campaigns like marketing. And a big thing about that is like when I do get these contracts and funding through these projects, I want to be able to give those job opportunities to other South Asians and minorities, because in Hong Kong, I saw that a lot of these projects go to the big artists, right? And I always thought that because I'm from Hyderabad and like a lot of the people that I know there, if they got a job in the art world, not only would they inspire their community, but I mean, not only would they inspire their family, but they would give hope to everyone in that community because they finally can see an Indian girl making it in the art world or like getting paid more than anything, getting paid as an artist. And I think that will give hope to so many people. And there's so much skill, right? And just giving that opportunity, because I can't take on everything. So definitely, like, you know, as I get gigs, whether it's hiring on contracts or like full time, that's always been my goal. So help minority artists, people like me, girls like me. And also, I've always taken like a portion of Hello Colors like income and put it back into art shows. And so that those art shows are always to raise awareness and give opportunities to like mental health artists and South Asian artists, like a lot of passion projects that come to giving, like that are about giving back. And I've been able to do that because of the client work that I get to do. So I hope that people still give me client work because it'll help support those passion projects. And yeah, I'm hoping to create a resource through a podcast and that'll be around very much about like their creative roles that are there so that people can see representation in the art world, like I don't know, like children's book illustrators or like what does a UI designer in banking do? You know, like these very niche creative roles, kind of platform them and create resources that young aspiring artists can like look to, and also parents who are supporting their children, they have these resources so that they can better support their children, you know, to become creative.
That's super exciting.
Yeah.
You're doing so much. I feel like you're doing the most, taking a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. But how do you actually take care of yourself among all of this chaos?
I have a lot, you know, my mental health journey has been like last 10 years of like dealing with depression, anxiety, ADHD and all of that. So I've learned to reach out when I need help. I've built a supportive community, mentors, friends, and habits. And I always, you know, make sure that I'm taking care of myself. So even before my career, my health comes first. So I really prioritize my mental health and have like very, very clear boundaries. So that's helped me, and talking about it helps, right? And yeah. What else was your question? Sorry.
I guess ultimately it's just, how does a freelancer take care of themselves in such turbulence of, you know, 1 month you have a lot of work and you're overwhelmed, and then another month you have no work and then you're stressed because you don't have an income that month. So how does one, I guess, strike a balance? And how have you managed it? Do you manage it?
I mean, no, it's been very difficult moving to a new country where you don't have that base, you don't have that you know, network. So I have to build it again from ground up, and it's a challenge. It's not easy. And this is my 4th year of freelancing, and I finally realized in my 4th year that I need to build a supportive community, right, of other creatives, friends that I can reach out to for support. I've been reaching out to people and just asking, hey, can you mentor me? I don't know anything about this, but I want to do this. Like, can you help guide me? And those are things that like I never did the last 4 years. And like now I'm feeling like even in the low times when like business isn't great, I can reach out for help and know that it's not always like positive. And a lot of the creative friends that I have, they, you know, in social media platforms and stuff, you can seem so successful, like you're always getting gigs, but it's not always the reality. And like talking to people will realize like it's not always, you know, rainbows and butterflies, right? There are low times, and I've been looking for creative like circles and things. Like we went to some, and speaking to other creatives about like the struggles and things like helps you realize you're not alone and gives you that drive to keep going. And whenever I do have low periods when I don't have client work, I always use that period to work on passion projects, and those passion projects always help me push myself into new spaces. And I use that downtime to like paint and like really give time to passion projects, because I know those will not only help my skill set grow, but it'll fuel my creative like fire to keep going. And yeah, that's just how it is. I think to be a creative is not easy, but it's truly that passion that like drives you. And I can't do anything else, because this is, you know, I get these like ideas to do passion projects and that's all I can think about, and that's what like tells me that I'm on the right path. Like it's like an itch, and like I need to like, before the idea expires, I need to make it happen, and I know I'm on the right path. And as long as I continue to do what I do and build my community, that I just have to hope that I'll be okay. You know?
Yeah, and I guess you will be, as long as you know when to reach out for help, because I think we're so hard on ourselves sometimes and think we can suffer in isolation.
Yeah.
We don't want to be a burden on someone else, right? But I guess I always think about it as if somebody came to me asking for help and I could see that things weren't quite right, I would do anything I could to help them, even if it's like a small thing that doesn't take a lot of my time or effort. So yeah, I think that's probably really useful for people to know if they are feeling quite stuck or in a low period in their own career. Thank you for coming on. This has been so detailed, and I feel like you've really shared so many nuggets. Thank you for being honest and transparent and vulnerable. My last question to you, Sravya, which I know you know it's coming. What do you have strong game in?
I thought about this. Can I just say what I said to you earlier?
Yes.
So I don't know if it's because I'm third cultured. I was like, with all the languages, I was like, I don't know if I've missed like a pop culture moment, but I don't know what that means. So I had to ask Krish. I was like, explain this to me. I was like, I don't know. So, okay. I think what I have strong game in is turning my ideas into reality. Like if I get an idea, I cannot sleep, and like I don't know anything about it, but I will like work until it becomes a reality. And I think I just hustle and like, yeah, just turning passion projects into reality and making them happen is, I think. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sravya.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. This has been so much fun. I'm really excited for your podcast and also for all the work that you're doing within the art space in London. Looking forward to, I think, just seeing more of you doing in-person workshops, because you did a mindfulness workshop that I attended as well recently, which was super fun. So just shamelessly plugging for anyone who wants like to attend more fun art workshops and things. And yeah, just keep doing you. And it's honestly super inspiring. I know that's like a very overused term, but the way that you've kind of hustled in your career and the way you've like not given up and been so open about the low points, it's really cool to see that you pick yourself back up and keep going and keep thriving. So
thank you.
Hi, me again. Just wanted to say thank you so much for listening to this episode of Brown Game Strong. I hope you enjoyed it and got something useful out of it. If you'd like to stick around, then please hit subscribe if you're listening on YouTube. And if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can click follow to get updated on all of the latest episodes. It helps me immensely in continuing to bring you more exciting guests and interesting stories so that we can continue to learn about all the awesome work that's happening in our community. Thank you for your support. It never goes unnoticed, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.